Regional American accent quiz. Are you ready? All right, here's your test.
As you know, in March of 2012, EPA announced the first ever carbon pollution standard.
Carbon pollution standard. Regional American accent quiz. If you guessed Texas, you would be wrong. If you guessed the great state of Wisconsin, maybe? Yeah, you would be wrong. No, the regional American accent locator you are looking for Gina McCarthy, the president's nominee to run the Environmental Protection Agency, is Boston, specifically South Boston.
As you know, in March of 2012, EPA announced the first ever carbon pollution standard.
See, in South Boston, they do not have carbon in March. They have cabin in March. And they park their cars in, you know the rest. The reason it matters that President Obama's nominee to head the EPA has that spectacular South Boston accent is because it is an indelible reminder of where she comes from. She comes from Massachusetts, which is both where she is very obviously from and where she used to work for Republican Governor Mitt Romney specifically. She was a top environmental official in the state of Massachusetts under Mitt Romney, and as such, she oversaw the implementation of Mr. Romney's Climate Action Plan to combat global warming. The centerpiece was a plan for Massachusetts to join with all the other states in the Northeast in a regional cap-and-trade system for emissions. That was Mitt Romney's plan, to be overseen by Gina McCarthy. And then Mitt Romney decided to try to get the Republican nomination for president in 2008, and so he decided to turn against all his own ideas. He backed out of the regional cap-and-trade thing and all of his other climate stuff. Gina McCarthy ultimately left what had suddenly become a dead-end job because the boss decided to run for the Republican nomination for president. Republican political ambition and environmental concerns mix about as well as oil and water. On the other hand, our current Democratic president has made a really big deal about this subject, from his lengthy and rather impassioned treatment of the issue in his second inaugural address, to his big speech accepting the nomination for president in the first place last year, to even little moments like the one today when the president was speaking to his export council, and he brought up how rising temperatures are going to raise really practical logistical issues for managing our nation's waterways as a means of shipping goods around the country. He talks about this issue all the time, frequently and at length. Of course, talk is one thing. Talk is cheap, right? Talk is easy. What about action? I mean, amid headlines like this, do headlines get any blunter than this? Look at that headline. Global temperatures highest in 4,000 years. Amid headlines like that, at a time when the Wall Street Journal is publishing the scariest chart I have ever seen published in the Wall Street Journal, and they're kind of known for their scary charts, look at that. Look at that graph. It's temperature change over time. Do you see how it shoots straight up off the chart at the end, like it hasn't in 11,000 years? At a time when the data and the headlines look like that, but the idea of climate change is still a laugh line for one of our two political parties in this country. Republicans are uniformly opposed to doing anything about it. What is possible? What is realistically possible? Some of what has been possible so far is encouraging the development of other forms of energy and other types of energy usage that could compete with traditional fossil fuels. In the presidential election, though, it of course became part of Mitt Romney's stump speech to deride the fact that there were government-supported loans for the electric car company Tesla. Mr. Romney said that was investing in losers, and the government shouldn't have done that. Well, now Tesla has just released its annual report explaining that it will start early repayment on its government-backed loans. Tesla thinks it will be profitable this quarter, and it is moving ahead of schedule to repay the investment made in that company by the government, an investment that was made to try to goose the American development of cars that run on electricity instead of gas. Here's the thing, though. That loan to Tesla that Republicans made such fun of during the election, that loan that actually turned out great in the end with early repayment and everything, that was made through a loan program created in 2007, signed into law by the previous president who was a Republican named George W. Bush. And now, even when that is paying off, even when it is working, it is a laugh line to them. Mitt Romney was good on the climate issue until he wanted to run for higher office. Republicans were all for investing in electric cars until they decided they would call it a joke and a travesty. At a time of some urgency on this issue, what are our chances of moving forward at a time when half of our political world is moving backward on this issue, even against their own ideas? Joining us now is a man who knows something about science and technology. He is a nuclear physicist who beat IBM's computer at Jeopardy! Congressman Rush Holt of New Jersey. Congressman Holt, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Rachel, it's always good to be with you.
When the Republicans are criticizing or trying to hold back this sort of investment, what impact do you think it has on innovation and new technologies that could help on these big issues of energy and climate change?
You know, I don't know how many wildfires, hurricanes, barges running aground on the Mississippi, tornadoes it takes before people realize that facing up to and dealing with climate change is in the public interest. And if that requires new research and development, somebody's got to pay for it. And if the private sector is not paying fully, not paying enough for research, not providing the financing that we need for the development, then there's nothing immoral or illogical about the federal government doing it. It is in the public interest to do so. And it often pays back big. And for something as big a crisis as climate change, we should hope for a big payback.
The common wisdom seems to be that this president has demonstrable commitment to this issue, but the likelihood of doing anything through Congress is just nil because of essentially uniform Republican opposition to doing anything that even acknowledges the problem, let alone tries to fix it. Do you share that sort of skepticism about anything being possible through Congress? Do you see any way that your colleagues on the other side of the aisle might get more creative or constructive on this issue?
I mean, on this issue, I'm not sure yet. There are a few promising signs. As you know, the Violence Against Women Act, the Hurricane Sandy relief, those were brought to the floor and passed with Democratic votes. The Speaker allowed that to happen. So that's encouraging. On climate change, I still don't see it. I don't know what it's going to take for people to wake up. They're just saying over and over again, well, we can't afford that. We can't afford to deal with it. Well, we can't afford not to deal with it. And, we're not a poor, impoverished nation. We're just acting like one. We should be investing as if we believe there will be a future for us. We should be investing in education and infrastructure and research and development, and particularly to deal with those problems that are staring us in the face, such as climate change.
Looking at this decision by Tesla to early repay its loan at the same time they're announcing that they expect to be profitable this quarter. So obviously we don't know in the long run whether or not that investment is going to pay off in specific ways, but we can see some early signs that might have been a good move. Given that, given your background as a scientist and your position as a congressman, are there other investments like that you would like to see the government making, that you'd like to see the public sector endorsing that we haven't done yet?
Well, the way we produce and use energy is the greatest insult to our planet. So there are myriad projects that should be undertaken, advances that need to be made in the way we produce and use energy, in energy efficiency, in new technologies, fusion energy, networking and energy storage for wind, all of those things. And there is, as you've pointed out, in Congress, an aversion to having the federal government involved in that. Well, the federal government's been involved in research, and it's worked out well. There were a couple of fellows named Brin and Page who were doing a digital library, federally funded NSF project. It turned into Google. That was a good investment. The Human Genome Project, and that was a pretty good investment. Nuclear magnetic resonance that gives us MRIs. That was a pretty good investment. There are so many things we can do. We are badly underinvesting in research and development, and we can see that by historical comparisons here in the United States, or more strikingly, by comparisons with other countries. And as I say, for something like climate change, which is very costly in lives and dollars if we don't deal with it, it's staring us in the face as something that we need to do research and development in.
Congressman Rush Holt, Democrat of New Jersey. It's always good to talk with you, sir. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Rachel.
Really appreciate your time. We'll say that the most striking contrast to me is what we are not able to do now that Republicans themselves were proposing that we do just a few years ago. Not just not proceeding, but actually making a U-turn on this issue in half of our politics. That's the thing that blows my mind. All right, we'll be right back.
friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. We do not give up. Expect surprises. Subscribe.